11 gunshots tore through the night. A burst of fire flashed inside the Sunshine Shandong apartment. Witnesses tried to rush in to save him, but they, too, vanished from the story. For a few seconds, the world seemed to hold its breath. In the darkness of that residential complex, sound traveled faster than certainty. Neighbors would later say they heard shouting, the dull thud of blows, a voice crying out in pain. Others claimed they saw flashes of light, sharp and brief, cutting through the windows like warnings that arrived too late. By morning, the only thing that felt undeniable was this: whatever happened that night refused to remain a simple explanation. Yu Menglong was gone. And almost immediately, the silence around his death felt louder than the gunshots themselves. But behind the glamour and the excuses, what mechanisms are really driving this crisis? We will analyze every detail, from the initial mistakes to the irreversible damage, to see how the entertainment world works and how an icon is redefined. To the public, Yu Menglong had always been associated with warmth. He smiled easily. He spoke gently. His image was carefully framed as someone kind, disciplined, and grateful for every opportunity. That was the version people thought they knew. Yet as the first fragments of information began to surface online, a very different narrative started to form. One built not on official statements, but on fragments, memories, and uneasy patterns. The earliest posts focused on the scene itself. 11 gunshots. Too many, some argued, for an accident. Then came claims of multiple witnesses, residents who supposedly tried to intervene and were never mentioned again. None of this came with verified documentation, yet the speed at which it spread revealed something deeper than rumor. It revealed distrust. A feeling shared by many that the official story was incomplete, perhaps even deliberately narrow. As attention intensified, the internet did what it always does in moments of uncertainty. It looked backward. Old videos of Yu Menglong were pulled apart frame by frame. Viewers noticed the way he sometimes walked, slightly hunched, one hand pressing against his abdomen. They noticed how he leaned against walls, how his posture seemed tense when certain people stood nearby. None of these details had mattered before. Now, they felt charged with meaning. Then came the detail that would haunt the discussion more than any other. In several older clips, fans claimed to see Yu Menglong's fingers tapping a pattern. 3 short movements, 3 long ones, then 3 short again. To anyone familiar with Morse code, the implication was chilling. SOS. A call for help hidden in plain sight, masked by a smile and swallowed by routine content. Imagine the weight of that possibility. A man smiling for the camera while silently asking to be saved. People smiling back, unaware that anything was wrong. Whether this interpretation was accurate or not almost became secondary. What mattered was how many felt a sharp collective regret, a sense that if the signs were real, everyone had failed to listen. The night did not end with the echo of gunshots. In many ways, that was when it truly began. As fragments of information drifted across social platforms, the public instinctively tried to reconstruct what the official narrative left unexplained. According to online posts and unverified accounts, the Sunshine Shandong area descended into chaos that evening. Residents described hearing shouting that did not sound like a simple argument, followed by heavy impacts against walls and furniture. Some claim they recognized Yu Menglong's voice among the noise, strained and desperate. Others recalled sirens arriving in rapid succession, ambulances, police vehicles, even larger trucks entering the compound under heavy presence. The scene, as it was described, felt excessive for what would later be labeled an accident. In moments like this, uncertainty becomes fertile ground. The absence of transparent, detailed explanations invites the mind to fill gaps on its own. The idea that there were witnesses, people who allegedly attempted to intervene, quickly took hold. These individuals, according to circulating claims, were never publicly identified, never interviewed, never followed up on. Whether they truly existed or not became almost irrelevant. What mattered was the perception of disappearance. To many observers, the silence around these supposed witnesses felt deliberate, reinforcing the belief that this was not a simple case of misfortune. As attention intensified, the story shifted backward in time. People began revisiting Yu Menglong's past appearances with a new lens, searching for signs that something had been wrong long before that night. In an old broadcast clip resurfaced by Taiwanese media, Yu Menglong was seen stepping out of a vehicle with visible difficulty. He walked slowly, one hand repeatedly pressing against his abdomen, his expression briefly tightening before he regained composure. At the time, it had passed unnoticed, dismissed as fatigue or minor discomfort. Now viewers questioned whether it was evidence of prolonged physical stress. Other clips followed. In one, he stood against a concrete wall, his posture awkward, his arm positioned at an unnatural angle. His clothing appeared oddly fastened, drawing comments that ranged from concern to unease. "It feels like a basement," some wrote. "Something about this is unsettling." These interpretations were subjective, shaped by hindsight and emotion, yet they spread rapidly because they resonated with a growing sense that the public image had concealed a private reality. More troubling than any single clip was the emotional pattern people believed they detected. Yu Menglong often smiled, but his eyes, viewers now argued, seemed distant, heavy, as if carrying exhaustion that words could not express. In isolation, such observations meant little. Combined with the tragedy that followed, they took on symbolic weight. The internet began constructing a narrative, not of sudden catastrophe, but of sustained pressure. Then came the detail that transformed speculation into something closer to collective grief. In several videos, fans noticed a repeated tapping motion of Yu Menglong's fingers. 3 short movements. 3 long. 3 short. Again. SOS. The universal signal for help. There was no confirmation that this was intentional. No statement from Yu Menglong himself. No expert analysis to verify whether the gesture was deliberate or coincidental. Yet the idea struck with such emotional force that it reshaped the entire discussion. If it was intentional, then the signs had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. If it was not, then the fact that so many people believed it could be said something profound about how desperate the public had become for meaning. The possibility alone carried immense emotional weight. It suggested a man trapped within circumstances he could not openly describe, performing normality while quietly signaling distress. It forced viewers to confront an uncomfortable question. How often do we mistake politeness and professionalism for well-being? Within the entertainment industry, silence is often interpreted as discipline. Smiling through discomfort is considered part of the job. Complaints are framed as weakness, ingratitude, or lack of resilience. In that environment, even genuine suffering can be normalized, overlooked, or strategically ignored. Whether Yu Menglong was sending a coded message or not, the discussion exposed how easily vulnerability can be concealed behind image management. As more people shared these clips, the tone of the conversation shifted from curiosity to regret. Comments appeared from fans who said they had watched these videos countless times without noticing anything unusual. If this was real, one wrote, "We failed him." Another asked whether it was even fair to look for signs after the fact when the person who could explain them was no longer alive. This was the turning point. The story stopped being solely about what happened that night and became about what might have been happening for much longer. It raised questions not just about individuals, but about systems. About how power, contracts, and image control can create environments where distress is hidden rather than addressed. And, as the focus deepened, one question rose above all others. If the case were ever to be formally revisited, someone from Yu Menglong's immediate family would need to step forward. That was when people realized something else was wrong. Because the woman who mattered most, the one person whose voice could reopen everything, seemed to be missing. As night turned into days and days into heated debate, one uncomfortable truth settled in. The story of Yu Menglong was no longer just about a death. It was about how quickly a life could be reduced to speculation, how easily kindness could coexist with suffering, and how fragile the boundary was between what is shown and what is endured. Because in this story, the more people try to clarify it, the more it feels like someone is trying to bury it. When uncertainty lingers, the public rarely remains patient. In the absence of clear answers, something else always emerges to fill the void. Judgment. What followed Yu Menglong's death was not a slow search for truth, but an avalanche. Online, grief quickly transformed into anger, and anger demanded direction. Within days, a phrase began circulating repeatedly across comment sections and private forums: the list of 17. It was not an official document, nor was it supported by legal findings. It was instead a collective construction, a way for the public to organize suspicion, to give shape to something that otherwise felt overwhelming and uncontrollable. The list functioned less as evidence and more as a psychological anchor. Faced with a story too complex and opaque, people reduced it to names. Individuals connected, directly or indirectly, to Yu Menglong's professional life were pulled into the spotlight one by one. To many, this was not about certainty. It was about balance. If someone had suffered, then someone else must be held responsible. The first figure to be repeatedly mentioned was his manager, Du Chang. Online discussions revisited old anecdotes, old videos, old moments that once seemed trivial. One detail in particular became symbolic. A luxury goose-down jacket, reportedly gifted to Yu Menglong by a brand he represented, was said to have ended up in Du Chang's possession instead. The internet seized on it immediately. Satirical videos appeared mocking the image of kind-eyed, balding Chang and urging him to remember the cold weather. It was not the jacket itself that mattered, but what it represented: control, entitlement, and a perceived imbalance of power. Soon after, attention shifted to Fan Shiki. His involvement was more indirect, yet the reaction was harsher. An upcoming drama project, still unaired, was flooded with one-star ratings. Comment sections filled with accusations and emotional language. Some users referenced a desperate cry attributed to Yu Menglong on the night of the tragedy, allegedly calling out Fan Shiki's name for help. These claims remained unverified, but their emotional impact was undeniable. The boycott was not framed as a critique of acting skill or artistic merit. It was framed as moral response. To many, supporting the project felt like betrayal. Producer Fang Li was next. Rumors spread rapidly, claiming he had lost 84 million yuan in a high-stakes betting agreement, that investors had forced his subsequent projects into debt, and that the pressure had driven him into physical collapse. None of these details were confirmed, yet they circulated widely because they aligned with a familiar narrative arc. In times of public outrage, there is a deep-rooted desire to see consequences unfold. Whether the stories were true or not, they satisfied a primal sense of justice, that wrongdoing, perceived or real, must eventually be punished. As these stories multiplied, the internet split into two distinct camps. One side believed firmly that these outcomes were not coincidences. To them, the cascade of misfortune was proof that hidden forces were being exposed, that the system was finally cracking under the weight of its own actions. In their view, public pressure was not reckless. It was necessary. Without it, they argued, powerful individuals would never face scrutiny. The other side urged caution. They warned against what they called digital vigilantism. They pointed out that online outrage does not follow due process, that reputations can be destroyed long before facts are established. To them, the list of 17 was not justice, but projection, a way to transfer grief onto convenient targets. Both perspectives coexisted, colliding daily in comment sections, live streams, and reposts. What united them, however, was a shared sense of mistrust. Very few people believed the official narrative could stand on its own. That disbelief became the fuel that kept the story alive. The consequences were immediate and visible. Projects associated with the names on the list faced sudden backlash. Ratings dropped. Brand partnerships became uncertain. Silence from those involved was interpreted not as restraint, but as guilt. In the modern media ecosystem, absence of response often speaks louder than denial. Yet amid the noise, another realization quietly took shape. The internet's focus on punishment was beginning to overshadow the original question. Who was Yu Menglong beyond the speculation? What had he experienced day after day before his life became a symbol? In trying to correct what felt unjust, the public risked creating a new kind of injustice, one driven by momentum rather than understanding. The story was no longer moving in a straight line. It was branching, multiplying, becoming something larger and harder to control. And just as the debate reached its most heated point, something unexpected happened. Signals began appearing from places where silence was usually absolute. Posts surfaced late at night from accounts linked to state-affiliated media. They used Yu Menglong's songs as background music, offered poetic imagery, then vanished by morning without explanation. For many watching closely, this was the moment the story shifted again. Because when even the quietest institutions begin to speak in riddles, it suggests that the current is far stronger beneath the surface than anyone had imagined. At a certain point, silence stops feeling neutral. It begins to feel deliberate. As public debate over Yu Menglong reached its peak, something unusual started to happen in spaces where ambiguity is normally avoided at all costs. State-affiliated media accounts, platforms known for careful wording and strict editorial control, began posting content that felt oddly poetic, even defiant. And just as quickly, those posts disappeared. Netizens were the first to notice the pattern. One account posted a late-night greeting video using Yu Menglong's song as background music. By morning, it was gone. No explanation, no correction, just absence. The following night, another account did the same. And again, it vanished with the sunrise. The repetition was impossible to ignore. At that level of media, nothing is casual. Even punctuation is chosen with intention. So when accounts linked to the Xinhua system shared short videos of koi fish, bright red bodies swimming upstream against the current, people paid attention. One caption read, "Do not drift with the current." Only by swimming strongly against the tide does one demonstrate true inner resilience. It sounded inspirational on the surface. In context, it felt charged. Who was this fish swimming upstream? And against what current? To many observers, the message seemed clear, without being explicit. These were not random posts. They were signals, carefully veiled, quickly erased. The act of posting and deleting became its own form of communication. A gesture that suggested internal disagreement, perhaps even quiet resistance, within institutions that rarely speak out of turn. The atmosphere shifted. This was no longer just a celebrity tragedy, amplified by social media. It began to resemble a struggle between forces trying to seal the narrative and others attempting, however subtly, to pry it open. Around the same time, another unexpected change occurred. Douyin quietly lifted its restriction on searches related to Yu Menglong's name. Some saw this as a small victory, proof that public pressure was working. Others warned it could be a test, or worse, bait. Stories emerged of accounts being banned after posting sensitive keywords, reinforcing the sense that visibility came at a cost. Amid this tension, a new focal point emerged. Tian Hai-rong. Her name did not surface randomly. It appeared through a convergence of accusations, industry whispers, and direct confrontation. Tian Hai-rong was widely described online as a powerful figure with extensive connections, someone capable of shaping careers and burying problems before they reached daylight. According to online claims, Yu Menglong had once refused so-called hidden rules associated with powerful backers and was subsequently frozen out of the industry for years. These reports were never formally confirmed, yet they circulated persistently. What gave the speculation renewed intensity was the involvement of Lin Beichuan. Lin was not an outsider. He was someone with first-hand experience in the system, someone who spoke with a confidence that suggested knowledge rather than guesswork. In a Weibo post dated October 17th, written while he was in France, Lin directly tagged Tian Hai-rong and issued a chilling challenge. He accused her of isolating and targeting Yu Menglong from the very beginning. He questioned whether she could kill him, and warned that if anything ever happened to him, she would not find peace. Such words were not framed as metaphor. They were raw, confrontational, and dangerous. Soon after, Lin Beichuan was forced back into military service, following a wave of online smears and coordinated attacks questioning his character. Entertainment commentator Song Zude publicly named Tian Hai-rong during this period, outlining her network of influence in Beijing and warning that power, like water, could both carry and capsize a boat. His post was deleted within minutes. To many watching, the sequence felt too precise to be coincidence. Exposure, deletion, reassignment, action, reaction, suppression. Yet even as the story climbed toward its most explosive point, another voice emerged, one that shifted the tone entirely. Daopeng had once been Yu Menglong's assistant. He resigned in 2022 and had largely stayed out of the public eye. Unlike others, he did not speak in accusations or codes. He wrote letters, 10 of them. They were not posted all at once. They appeared gradually, each one heavy with memory and grief. In them, Daopeng described Yu Menglong not as a symbol or a victim, but as a person. Someone who checked on friends when the weather changed. Someone who believed phone calls mattered more than messages because hearing a voice brought reassurance. Someone who quietly donated, taught in remote areas, and endured hardship without complaint. He wrote about a poem he once copied for Yu Menglong after a film wrapped. A poem about plum blossoms blooming against frost and snow, about endurance and the promise of spring. To Daopeng, Yu Menglong had survived 12 years of fog, a long winter that seemed finally ready to break. And then, just as spring approached, he was gone. The letters revealed something the noise had buried: humanity. They reminded readers that before the lists, before the theories, before the power struggles, there was a man who believed in simple principles. That even small kindnesses were worth doing. That even small evils were not. Online, the reaction was immediate and emotional. Many who had been consumed by anger paused. Others cried openly in comments. The narrative shifted from outrage to reflection. People began to ask not only who was responsible, but what kind of world allowed someone so gentle to suffer in silence. What do you think about this? Comment Amen below so we can continue with the unfinished stories. As protests continued to grow online, a slogan spread rapidly across platforms. If you ban you, we ban entertainment. It was less a threat than a declaration. A statement that memory could not be erased so easily. And that was when the story stopped being only about how he died, and became about who still controls what the world is allowed to remember. In the end, the story of Yu Menglong refuses to settle into a single conclusion. What remains is not clarity, but layers. Layers of silence, layers of interpretation, layers of unresolved emotion. The gunshots that first tore through the night may have marked the physical end of a life, but they also triggered something far more enduring. A fracture in public trust that cannot be repaired with a brief statement or a simplified explanation. For some, this story is about power, about how influence operates behind closed doors, how careers can be shaped or erased, and how narratives are managed when too much is at stake. For others, it is about media itself, the strange choreography of posting and deleting, of metaphors that appear briefly before vanishing, of signals that feel intentional precisely because they are never explained. And for many, it is about something more intimate: regret. The regret of watching old videos with new eyes. The regret of realizing that kindness does not protect someone from harm. The regret of wondering whether a quiet cry for help, if it truly existed, was ignored simply because it did not fit the image everyone wanted to see. Throughout this entire storm, one uncomfortable truth has remained constant. No rumor, no list, no viral slogan can replace verified facts. Online speculation, no matter how emotionally compelling, cannot serve as judgment. Yet silence, when it persists too long, invites its own consequences. It creates space where fear and imagination thrive, where people stop believing in official narratives, not because they want chaos, but because they no longer recognize transparency. Yu Menglong has become a symbol, but symbols are heavy things. They flatten complexity. They turn a human life into a battlefield for meaning. And while movements like, if you ban you, we ban entertainment, speak to a desire for accountability, they also reveal how deeply people feel unheard. This is not merely a fan reaction. It is a reflection of a broader anxiety about systems that feel distant, untouchable, and unwilling to explain themselves. Perhaps the most haunting part of this story is not what is known, but what is required for it to move forward. A family member, a voice with legal standing, someone who can step out of the shadows and reopen a door that now seems sealed. Until that happens, the case risks remaining frozen in ambiguity, officially closed yet emotionally unresolved. In that space between closure and truth, the public is left with a choice: to consume the story endlessly as spectacle, or to slow down, question carefully, and resist turning grief into another form of violence. Yu Menglong's legacy may ultimately have little to do with how he died. It may rest instead on what his story exposed, about the cost of silence, the fragility of image, and the danger of ignoring suffering simply because it smiles back at us. If the truth ever surfaces, it will not arrive loudly. It will emerge quietly through patience, persistence, and the courage to listen without fear. And until then, one question continues to echo beneath everything else. If someone really was calling for help, how many of us would recognize the signal next time?